At least nawala na yung kahihiyan ko tungkol dun sa connections. So, some admin matters before we start the class. Like I said, the first one is the deadline of the OWNETA case that I asked you to rank and select the top 3 projects. Please take note, there is a way to rank them. And in the document that I gave you, there is a selection process that you can use in order for you to limit the projects that you will be considering. So that's one. The second admin matter would be Ma'am Sandra, Sir Pabs, and I already met yesterday morning, okay, to finalize the deadlines of your paper, okay? In consideration of your own deliverables for next week, for the quarter 1 classes, and for some of you, you have not yet fully talked about, met with your, anong tawag dito? Your point person in ITRMO. I saw that 1 or 2 groups still wanted to meet with their point persons late from yesterday until early next week. So please do so. If you want further clarification, then that's okay. But what you have here are the new deadlines. So in deliverable 1, you're going to submit on November. That will be now due on November 6th. We give us a week to return your documents, your first deliverable, back to you. Okay, and then the second deliverable is due on December 11th. The way you're going to proceed with regards to your project, like I said, will be, I think at the start, will be you need to do a video presentation. So that will be done on December 14th. And in the project presentation will be spread out to 3 days, December 17, 18, and 19. Traditionally, we've done this in one day na pwedeng sabay-sabay, but because some of the ITRMO people overlap, or we cannot afford the ITRMO people to be gone for a whole day or what. Kasi your 12 groups, 6 hours per day. So parang tatanggalin natin yung key people ng ITRMO for 2 whole days. That may be problematic, especially during this time when grades are supposed to be submitted. Okay? Or at least ito yung mga times na baka may mga magka-issue in terms of submission of grades, connection, and so on. So we've decided to spread it out across 3 days. As to when each and every one of the groups will defend, that is another issue to be discussed later on. Okay, so this is what you're going to uh, look at in terms of schedule in the coming weeks. Okay, just to let you know again, in terms of deliverable 1, I mentioned this the last time already, just repeating it. If ever there was a choppy connection that I had the last time around, the outputs would be 1, develop the project charter. Okay, and you do have the template already. And then you're going to create the RASI matrix template, which we're going to discuss today, and then your work breakdown structure. Okay. So those are the 2 major admin matters. For the third major admin matter is that starting the following modules, okay, at least the major modules, what we're going to do is we're going to usually start off with a lecture for me to summarize everything, at least give you a big overview, and then the modules themselves will be details and details about more details about the overview of that particular module, and then you're going to have the activities online. Okay, so that's how we're now going to proceed. Okay, I think for some of you that would be much more helpful. So the next what do you call this? The next sync class will be next week. Okay, so next week is your deadline for your exams. The next one, if I were to look at your calendar, would be November 3. Okay, so that will be the next sync session. But I'll open the modules already if you do want to take note of those modules already. Okay, so that's all of the admin matters. Are there any questions first from an admin matter perspective, both from the deliverable that is due 11:59 later? The second one is the project, and the third one, which is more minor, it's more implementation. It's just how we're going to continue on. Okay. If you do have any afterthought questions, just put them in chat and I'll get back to them in a little while. Okay. So let me now continue on with the lecture. Okay. The assumption that I made is that you have watched the two videos. They're just 15 minutes each. It is all about project scope management process. Okay. So let me now share my screen. There are two phases that or two video clips that I released in terms of project scope management. And those two phases cover the first two steps of the whole scope management process, which is plan the scope management, and the second one is collect requirements. Okay. So with those two, what you essentially should now have is the foundation for you to develop the next step or do the next activity, which is you now want to define the scope of the project. And the main output of this activity or this step in the process is what you call a project scope statement. So if your project charter is a grand overview of what the project should be, the project scope statement is a little bit more detail with regards, gives you a little bit more detail with regards to the whole scope of the project. So that's the first um, topic that I am going to discuss for today. Um, Essentially, the scope statement document or it is a document. And like any document, it will have certain components. Uh, According to the project management body of knowledge, a good scope statement should contain 7 major subtopics. Okay, I'll show the sorry 8. I'll show them as we move along. Okay, so the first three components of the scope statement would be justification, your justification for the project, the scope description of the project, the business and project objectives. Okay. Now, in order for us to make this a little bit more tangible and to give an example, the example that I will use, much like what I used in the two videos that I indicated the last time around, would be, let us assume that you're the project manager who is tasked to develop and implement an online load revision process for the Loyola schools in time for the second semester. Okay? So if that is what Doc Marlo Vilches, who is the vice president of Ateneo, told you, what would be what would be the components of your project scope statement? You've done the scope management plan, and you've talked to everyone that is involved in this particular project. You talk to the registrar, you talk to the VPLS, you talk to the deans, you talk to ADAA, you talk to the graduate school. So you gathered all of the requirements necessary and you filled up all of those 6 boxes in terms of the quote unquote different type of requirements. Now, once you have all of that, it's time to sit down and start writing your scope document. The first thing you have to have clear in your mind is identify the justification of the project. So in the justification part, you are supposed to explain the need for the project and how will the end result solve that need. So for this particular example, I'm not going to write here the whole justification, obviously, because it's going to be a narrative. It can be a paragraph long, 2 paragraphs long, 3 paragraphs long, lalo na kung napakalaki ng project. Okay? Pero kung maikli lang, then it can be explained maybe in 2 paragraphs. If it's a little bit more complex, then you might need to have a page or a page and a half. So when you look at the justification for developing and implementing an online load revision process, you're essentially asking questions like, what environment are we in right now to justify an online load revision process? Okay? Bakit natin kailangan itong online load revision process? Well, the common answer going to say, kasi dati manual kasi. Tapos ngayon, dahil Students cannot go out because you're underage. Not all students can go out because a lot of them are underage. They don't meet the cutoff of the IATF. Therefore, they need to have an online process so that they don't have to go out of their homes. Okay, so that's one potential environment, okay, to justify why you have to, okay, why you have to go, why you have to go through this project. Okay, what is a problem that we are encountering? Okay, and the problem that you are encountering right now is that everything is manual. People can go out. People can do the normal load revision process. And how can building a load revision process help us solve this current problem? Okay, so yun sinabi ko kanina about all of the reasons why we need to do that online load revision process. That students cannot go out, students cannot be found in school, they might they might catch coronavirus and so on and so forth. That is a good justification for doing the online load revision process. Okay, to be honest, I was part of the team before that was proposing doing an online load revision process. Guess what? We were shut down long before. And why is that? And I'll be frank to you. The only reason why we wanted it to still be manual is that it is quote unquote back then. Um, we want to make the load revision process much more difficult for students so that they get their online registration proper. Okay? So in the mindset of the students, kung pahirapan namin ang load revision and hirap yon, hindi nila gagawin yon. Okay? Back then, what? That was 5, 6, 7 years ago? Yeah, mga 7 years ago. Um, it did dissuade a lot of students, but as the years progressed, the students started finding a lot of loopholes with regards to the load revision process. So, hindi na nila tinatapos, hindi na ninyo tinatapos ang load revision ninyo, yung inyong online registration, and you'd rather go through the hell of the load revision process. Right now, it's heller for you because it's the first time we did the online load revision process. So there are a lot of complaints, okay? And we are hoping that the second iteration would be smooth enough for everyone so that the complaints will be lessened, okay? We cannot totally remove complaints, but they will still be there. So that's the aspect of justification. You are going to justify why you need the project. So go think about your own project for ITMRO and find out what's the reason for really doing this project. Okay. Now, once you're clear about why you're doing the project, you now need to create your scope description, which is a high level description of what the project is and what it isn't. And take note, this is a high level. So you can just say we are going to develop an online load revision process in time for the second semester of registration from blah, 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 blah. And it will cover certain aspects, period. Yun lang. And in that statement, all you just said was that you're going to develop, which means you're part of the development team. But if you say we are going to also include changing processes, changing documents, then your scope starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So in this case, you need to have a very high level understanding of what the project is and what the project isn't. Pag sinabi mo lang develop and implement a load revision process, yung load revision process na yon could either be manual or online. There's nothing in the project which actually tells you that it is online. If that is your scope description, ha? Pero if based from your requirements, isang non-functional requirement na kailangan is that it has to be online, then that informs your scope description na alam mo na dapat siya online load revision process. Ang problema minsan sa projects, lalo na pagsulat ng scope, inuunahan natin yung client. Okay? In such a way na when the client says this is our problem, we immediately imagine na ito na dapat yung solution. That's good, but hold that idea first until you actually talk to the client, because you might be thinking of something very, very complex when actually what excuse me, what you wanted is just something very simple. So for this particular project, the scope, potential scope description would be, I'm just going to tell you in a paragraph, what exactly will you be doing? Okay. So in one paragraph, what exactly will you be doing? Now, the third component of the scope statement will be your business and project objective. In this case, think like a business owner, okay? Owner of the unit, head of the department, dean of the school of science and engineering, or the VP for Loyola schools, and understand what are the targets the business units or orgs hope to achieve with this particular project. Now, itong business and project objectives nito, dapat makuha ninyo yan doon sa business requirements. Remember, if you properly put your finger in each and every one of those requirements that I asked you to think of from last week, you should be able to do all of this clearly, properly, and you can define the scope already. Okay. So for the business and project objectives, excuse me, some sample questions that you can ask, okay, is what does the registrar want to achieve? Does the registrar want to achieve a quick registration process, a quick load revision process? And if it's quick, how do you define quick? Is it reduction from 4 days to 2 days? Do you want what does the ADAA want? From ADAA's perspective, they want something accurate in terms of the load revision process. They want something that monitors student loads properly. Okay, and what does the other schools want to achieve? Happy students. Okay, they're satisfied with the load revision process. So kaya importante ang mga surveys. Oh, by the way, if you think one thing I think that I would recommend right now is that Doc Marlu released an email to everyone, the whole community, saying that we are going to start doing an FGD again with regards to this whole online learning online learning experience. And one of the data that we need would be you answering the faculty evaluation form. So go to ISIS and then there's course and faculty evaluation. Please do so that we have good data. And with that data, that will be part and parcel of the business requirements, and that set of business requirements can be turned into our own business and project objectives. Okay, so that's the first part: justification, scope description, business and project objectives. Let me stop here. Is there any question? Okay, by the way, as I go through things, you can start putting questions on the chat. Is there any question for these first three things? And all of these are narratives. Okay, the justification is a narrative, the scope description is a narrative. Your business and project objectives can be bullet points, and it can be divided across different stakeholders, or you can just lump everything into one set of business and project objectives, so long as your stakeholders agree that those are all of your business, those are the relevant business and project objectives. Okay, so there's none. Okay, so that's the first three. Let's go to the next three. For the next three, it will be the project deliverables, the project's exclusions, and the project assumptions. For the deliverables, we're asking here, what does your project need to produce in order to meet the business objectives? So if your business objective will be to reduce the whole load revision process from 4 days to 2 days, how are you going to do that? Okay. Obviously, one of them would be to build the system. That's one major project deliverable. The other one would be maybe there are new templates or documents that need to be created. That's another deliverable. Maybe the whole new set of policies about how you do online load revision. That's another deliverable. Maybe you also need to train the people. That may be another deliverable. And take note, kung ang project scope lang ninyo is development. You don't even need to worry about the training. That's not part of your deliverable. Okay? If I say that the scope is just simply to program, I think a better word there is not develop, but program the online load revision process. So clear ka hanggang programming ka lang. Hindi ka gagawa ng user manual. Okay? But if you define programming including user manual, then that should be part of your scope, and that should also be reflected in your project deliverables. So you need to know the boundaries of each and every one. Okay? Some of them, they say they take for granted. Siyempre, pag nag-programming ka and you give a system, dapat may kasamang user manual. If that's the expectation, please outline it in the system, in your scope document. Kasi I've seen some projects wherein nilagay lang programming, okay, program website, and then binigay na yung website, tapos hinihingi ng client, nasan yung manual nito, nasan yung user interface design, nasan yung mga wireframes. Eh, kung ang deliverable lang is the website, dito lang bibigay mo. Bakit mo pa kailangan ibigay mga wireframes and everything else? Okay? But if part of the deliverable is a documentation on how you created that website, then you should also you should give those wireframes. Again, you have to define what is part of that documentation. Okay? So the clearer the things are at the start, the better for you. Okay? So with project deliverables, okay, I'll go back na lang. Okay? I'll go through it. I did not animate it properly. The fourth one would be project exclusions. What does the project not include? So I already gave examples kanina by saying clearly na ito dapat lang ang gagawin mo. You would know na I'm not going to submit a documentation. I am not going to, if it's a load revision process, dapat alam mo yung load revision process lang ba yung pang undergrad students lang or undergrad and grad students. Kasi yung grad students, graduate students, may load revision din yan. So yung mga kunwari, 4-5-year MSCS, MIS, MSCS sa inyo dyan, baka mamaya pag load revision ng undergrad 4th year, online kayo, di nag-enjoy kayo. Pagdating ng grad, yung load revision yung manual or email. Sabi niya, bakit ganon? Because we excluded the grad students in that whole process. So the project exclusions clearly says this project is just for undergrad students. Okay, so that's what is part and parcel of project exclusions. And then lastly, this is just on your part, what are things that you assume that you need to develop the project? For a website, maybe one of the assumptions there would be, I assume na wala kayong branding issue, wala kayong color preference. Okay? So kung gagawa ka ng website for Ateneo, pwede ka maglagay dyan ng black website. Why? Because if the assumption is there is no branding document, which means na pag website ng Ateneo, ito dapat yung color, logo ng Ateneo, ganito, and so on and so forth. Kung tama yung assumption mo yun, then you can technically create any website. Okay? But, and the purpose of those assumptions is really for clarifications. Are those the right assumptions that you made when you develop this? Okay? Another assumption is that when you created the load revision system, one potential assumption that you are going to maybe think of or state there is that I assume that that the VPLS or ADAA already has the rules associated with load revision. Okay? And ang gagawin mo na lang programming and design. Okay? So these three deliverables, exclusions, assumptions are more or less interrelated with each other. And these three feed into each other. These three clarify your whole project some more. Okay, so like I said, what are examples of this one? For project deliverables, I did mention what are the things we expect to give as final output to the LS at the end of this project. For project exclusions, as you look at your requirements, ask yourself what is not included, what don't you want, or what you don't want to include when you develop the load revision process. Pwedeng technically ikaw magsabi, ayokong i-include yan. Okay? But again, it's not unilateral, by the way. You have to again refer to your project requirements and at the same time consult with your stakeholders. Na, pwede ba itong i-exclude? And you have to give a reason. Well, pag in-include natin, tataas ang cost, it will take longer, and so on and so forth. And like I said, for project assumptions, what assumptions did we make when we are going to go through this project? Okay. The last one would be everything about project constraints and critical success factors. I'll explain project constraints later, and with critical success factors, think of this as your measures to determine how you're going to check whether the project is successful or not. So the examples here would be in project constraints would be, are you constrained by time, cost, or scope? And I'll just leave it there because I have another set of slides to explain this one. And for critical success factors, what are the measures we will use to determine that the implementation of the new load revision process is successful? To be honest, all orgs actually already in a way create their scope statement when you do your projects. Do you, I can't remember the term, please help me out, put it in the chat or state it out. What is that long form that you fill up when you propose a project? Can anyone mention that? What do you call that long form? Well, I know it as a long form, but what do you call it officially? What do you call that long form? And if you look at that long form that you use to propose a project, you have all of these already. There's a timeline, there's critical. How do you measure the success of your work project? Usually, ang sinasabi yung membership. Sinasabi yung may user survey kayo, may user satisfaction kayo, may revenue kayo. Okay? So yun yung critical success factors rin ninyo dyan. Okay? No one remembers that one. I have no one in the chat or no one telling me. Okay, I leave it at that if you can't remember. But if you have been part of that group of people, we propose projects and create that long form. That is an example of a scope statement. Now, you can search through the net and there are a lot of templates with scope statements. Okay, that's fine. Okay, but make sure that whatever template you use, these components are always there. Okay, so it could be narrative format, it could be one long, it could be in table, parang yung binigay kong table sa inyo nun. Okay, but at the end of the day, you should have this scope statement. So any questions? Okay, so far, I'm assuming this is still clear. Okay. So I'm still assuming this is still clear. Okay. Now, one important framework, and this is where I will now start explaining what I presented in here, the concept of a project constraint. One important framework so far that you know, and this is in the module, in module 1, is the project managed triage, wherein you always have the tension between scope, cost, and time. If you move one of the other two has to give. If you try to make it longer, if you want the project to be longer, takes longer time, then you might increase the cost or you might want to increase the scope. If the scope suddenly increased, then it will either affect the cost of the project or the time of the project. Okay, so there's always a project management trade-off here. And the center of this is, as project manager, you always have to maintain that quality. One additional framework that I will introduce is the concept of the project management priorities. Because as you develop and craft the scope document, you start understanding the priority of the project. And this was created by a management scientist, Gray and Larson. Okay, according to them, you have to check which of the three will be constrained, enhance, or accept, and what do each and every one of these need. When a project is constrained, or that component of the triage, not a project, but that component of the triage is constrained, that means that is non-negotiable. The original parameter is fixed. So this means that if this is the scope as I defined it, yan ang gusto kong lumabas. Pag ito ang deadline, you say the deadline is December 31, no touch. Kailangan December 31 lumabas siya. Kung 1 million lang budget mo, 1 million lang. That's it. In other words, that's what you mean when it's constrained. Now, if the project managers, if the stakeholder says, and your client says, ay, okay, itong scope na ito, we can add or subtract, then that one is accept. Okay? Meaning, yes, tatanggapin ko na may adjustment dyan sa scope. Or, it's December 31, pero you can submit or you finish it 2 weeks later. December 31 might be a soft deadline. Okay? And then pagdating naman sa cost, okay, 1 million give or take 200,000. So if you cannot touch it, it's constrained. Cannot change it, it's constrained. If you can adjust and later on negotiate, then that's accept. Okay? The one that you now want to improve quality on, because one is constrained, one is accept, the remaining one, you try to enhance. Okay? So this is better understood in the actual form or template that Gray and Larson proposes. In this matrix, you have there a matrix of the, what do you call this? The components of the PM triage and the type of each of these components, whether it's constrained, enhance, or accept. So pag fixed, it's constrained, no touch. If it's movable, it's accept. And then you make things better. Okay? Here's one, what you need to do right now is for each and every one of those resources or of those components, ask yourself, is it constrained, enhance, or accept? And once you chose one, what do you call this? What do you, constrain, annex? One situation, okay, one state, I think that's the term, one state, then the other components of the PM triage cannot be in that state. So what do I mean? So let me bring out a pen and say, if I say that the deadline of the project, non-negotiable, is December 31, that means that the time is constrained. Okay? So what does that mean in your terms? You have to make sure that you finish by December 31. That's foremost on your minds. So the time can no longer be enhance or accept. So if we follow the PM triage, that means that I cannot fix the scope and the resources. I cannot. I should not fix the scope and the resources. I should not. Because kung sabihin mo, ay, December 31 tsaka 1 million lang, parang hindi naman yun pwede. Because the purpose nga of that PM triage is to understand that one of them has to adjust. So that's the rationale for just choosing one of these components in the PM triage to be a certain state. Now, kung yung time mo ay constrained, you have to now think and discuss with your client, o alin ngayon ang ating accept? O kung willing siyang part of that system, part of the website, can be not be launched on December, December 31, then that's already a signal for you, accept yung kanyang scope. Okay? So, hindi na pwede ang scope na enhance, hindi na rin pwede resources accept. Okay? So, how can you now, where will resources fit in right now? It will fit in enhance. What do you mean by enhance? Oh, I'll make, when you talk about resources would now indicate that, okay, this is the money, this is the people, this is the equipment that I'm going to use. When you say enhance, I will not spend all of the 1 million. That's a good way to enhance the project. Okay? So, sir, ba't ko naman i-enhance kung ang budget mo ay 1 million? It's a way for you to satisfy the client that yes, you met their constraint. Yes, nag-give in na siya dun sa scope. So on your part, you do your best to make sure that you enhance at least the other part. Meaning, okay, because nag-okay ka na sa scope na hindi naman pala lahat siya, no? Imbis na 3 tao ang gamitin ko, 2 lang. So that's where the enhancement starts coming in. Okay? Let me now give another example. So let me erase this one. Okay. Erase all ink and slide. And what if I say, this is how it works? That ang fixed ngayon ay resources. So kung fixed ang resources, hindi pwedeng enhance ito, accept. Hindi rin pwedeng constrain ang scope and time. Enhance, accept ang time. So that means we try to enhance the scope. And what does this mean? This means na you only have 1 million pesos and you only need to work, you can only work with 2 people dahil yung ibang tao may ibang ginagawa. Okay? So, and when they said that, you can now say, oh, which one should we now, is movable? And he said, well, time. Okay? Yes, ang deadline nito ay December 31, pero I'm willing because of those certain constraints that I put you, those fixed constraints. Then I'm willing to extend it 1 month later to January 31. But I need to see some output already by this time. Well, then that's good. And at the end of the day, how can you enhance the scope? Parang pwede mong sabihin, ay, okay, sige. Kung ganun lang pala, then let's try playing around with some of the scope aspects of the project. Kung hindi naman talaga kailangan ng user manual, maybe we can add, dahil nga nag-extend nga siya ng konti eh. Siguro ang kailangan mo lang ay 1 week. What will you do with the remaining 3 weeks? Maybe you can add some more bells and whistles to the project. Maybe you can add a user manual. Pagandahin mo yung user manual. So this is how this matrix is used. Please take note, kailangan match ikaw, your project team, with the yung priority ng teams with the priority of the client. And let me give this very specific example. Ngayon, ano ang fix ninyo? As students, ang fix ninyo ay time. Bakit time? Kasi naghahabol kayo ng deadlines. Because kung hindi nyo mahabot yung deadlines, wala kayong grade. Kung wala kayong grade, hindi kayo gagraduate. Diba? Pero for a client sometimes, what's more important for them, and the one that's fixed, is scope. They want this. Or sometimes, they just say resources, 0. Wala akong mabibigay, walang pera. Yun na yun. Okay? So, in your case, you and your client have to be in sync. Or at least, kung hindi kayo pwedeng mag-sync, ikaw ang mag-a-adjust. As students, in this case, we're looking at it, you as students. Kayo ang mangyayari mag-a-adjust. But in the real world, this usually is a negotiation. Because you're going to earn money from this. You're going to end up earning money in developing projects for your clients. Okay? So I'll stop again here. Any questions? Okay. Any questions? Okay. Okay, I don't still see any questions. So I hope you understand this one. Okay, can I just have at least a feedback? Can I have a thumbs up? Are you still all awake? Are you still awake? Still listening, guys? Okay, sige. Thank you very much. At least I have a sense of everyone's listening. And can I get a face reaction na I'm not choppy? I'm not choppy. I'm still okay in terms of connection here. Okay. Bea says yes. Okay. Okay, for everyone else, I'm assuming that I'm still okay from a choppy perspective. Thank you, Alessandro. When you say I'm fine, guwapo ba ako? Nagbubuhat ako ng bangko. Sayang wala akong reaction sa inyo. I love laughter. I wish I had the laughter of students. Okay? So thank you very much for all of your reactions, and I hope you're still with me here. Okay?